you, the working person, are going to need to be ready to learn, unlearn, and relearn and do jobs that don't exist today. Take skills you have and identify what the delta is, what the gap is between what you need to know and then figure out where you need to learn it and learn those skills and then do the new job and then do it again and then do it again.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi, and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. My name's Rick Nuske. I'm the host of this wonderful experience, and I just want to take pause to thank you, the listeners, for supporting the show, and all of my guests. You have been absolutely wonderful. Your feedback is incredible, and it's making all the difference, knowing that it's making a difference for you. Now, on today's show, I have somebody incredibly special. His name's Christopher Bishop, and we're going to be talking about Futurist. We're going to be looking at the future of jobs, and a lot of other different things, a lot of very interesting topics that Christopher has been involved with throughout his life. So welcome to the show, Christopher.
Well, hello, and welcome. Delighted to be here. I'm just unplugging my phone. I realized I have a landline next to my desk, and mostly I get spam calls these days, but it would be a drag to be interrupted.
You're not the only one.
Rick, I'm delighted to be here. Looking forward to our conversation, sharing my perspective on how people need to think about learning and working in the global borderless workplace, and especially in this crazy time that we're in with the pandemic and the global economic collapse.
Yes, it's absolutely my pleasure to have you here. Now, we were just talking offline about, the quickening process, technology, and the intertwining of all these wonderful things. I mean, it is, after all, a great, big, wonderful world we live in, and opportunities abound in the toughest time. Is it a matter of perspective, do you think?
Yes, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I was saying before, I just posted a piece that I've been thinking about for a while that to LinkedIn. I encourage your listeners or viewers to check it out. It's called Chase the Maelstrom, Find the Chaos, Go for the Mayhem. And what it is basically is just suggesting we all keep in mind that there have been these kinds of crises before. Humans have been dealing with this for thousands of years, whether it's like, oh no, somebody put the fire out, we've got to get lightning to strike again so we can cook the woolly mammoth.
Yep.
But I mean, even things like the Black Death and the Great Depression. But the idea is that certainly while it's trying and challenging, that there are opportunities that emerge out of these kinds of crises. And I would encourage listeners and viewers to think about that.
Yeah, well, look, just as a bit of a forward, we will be providing all of the links back to your good self, as well as relevant LinkedIn posts, so people will be absolutely able to find you. Now, I always like to unwind my guests' life, their personal sides, and do you have a story to tell? I was wondering if we can skip back a few years and learn a little bit about your personal journey, and including where you are at the moment in the world.
Okay, well, so try to do what we call the Reader's Digest version, right, or the elevator pitch. So I describe myself as a nonlinear, multimodal careerist. I sort of made that up. But I've had 8 careers so far. I have a degree in German literature from a liberal arts college in Vermont, small school. After graduating from college, I got a gig touring with a band called McHenry Spring. Did 3 albums with them, opened for groups like the Eagles and ZZ Top. The band broke up. I moved to New York, became a session musician, toured and recorded with people like Robert Palmer. I did 2 tours and a live album at the Dominion Theatre in London with him. I'm a bass player, by the way. And then got into the session scene in New York, and then realized that the people on the other side of the glass in the recording studio were the ones actually in control on making a living. So I became a jingle producer, writing and producing music for TV and radio advertising. Then became intrigued by the World Wide Web and taught myself to be a web producer in the early 90s, and hung out a shingle as a freelance web producer, and then worked at a couple of agencies in New York, and then much to my surprise was hired by, drum roll, IBM of all companies.
Fantastic.
And I worked there for 15 years in a variety of roles. Certainly helping put consulting strategies together, because as these execs with P&Ls realized they could actually sell stuff with this wacky web thing, and service clients and deal with supply chain and business partners, as well as analysts and journalists and, other parts of their ecosystem. We, the corporate internet programs team, were pulled into, more broad business kinds of conversations. Did a lot of social media at IBM, was active in the virtual universe community. We built instances in Second Life. I don't know if any of you remember that, but
Mm-hmm.
and that's still going on to some degree today. And then got offered a package and was old enough to e-tire and left IBM about 7 years ago and been working as a freelance kind of writer and speaker, thinking about the future of work
Yeah, you,
based
you
on all these careers I've had.
yes, absolutely, and that's what I was going to go into if we could do as a bit of a segue, is to ask you, with all of these experiences, these life's experiences, and your personality, do you think that that's given you a unique perspective of how this is all going to turn out in relation to humans' relationship with technology?
Well, I do. I mean, I've always been kind of a nerd. I mean, in junior high school, I was like one of the geeky guys with the tape over the glasses. Now I have these Italian designer ones, but
Very nice.
you, these were like preceded by the pretty nerdy, 50s style. I was into gamma rays and the science club. So I've always been kind of a closet nerd, if you will. And I think music and mathematics tie together as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what sort of happened is I got asked to give a keynote address at my alma mater to kick off a bunch of senior week activities because they had a sense I'd done a bunch of different things. And reflecting upon how I'd navigated these multiple careers at that point, I said, and looking at the way people were learning and working, it was like, I'm kind of, with all lack of modesty, the poster child for the way today's learners are certainly going to work. And began to do some research and discovered data points like that the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics says today's learners are going to have 8 to 10 jobs by the time they're 38. Other research indicates that 85% of the jobs that today's learners are going to do haven't been invented yet. And that ties to my life. So, I mean, I was running a synclavier, a digital musical instrument in New York
Mm-hmm.
in the early 90s that didn't exist like 10 years before that. That wasn't a job, running a digital musical instrument or building websites. I mean, in 1994, there were like 10,000 websites on the planet.
Cutting
So
edge,
again,
wasn't it?
yeah, so I'm reflecting on how technology has changed culture and business and society, and it's really been doing it for hundreds of years, if not longer.
So, do you think that, I guess, global crises as we're going through right now is an opportunity to adapt and innovate? And how does that work?
Yes, I do, absolutely. I mean, as again, I said in my piece, I mean, things, I can think of half a dozen examples right off the top of my head,
Hmm.
which I think will resonate again with viewers and listeners. I mean, education is never going to be the same, right? Any of us who have kids in school or friends who are teachers, I mean, it's a whole new model. It's a hybrid approach now, bricks and mortars and virtual. I mean, business meetings. So here we are, you and I, we're half a planet apart, and
Hmm.
we're having a conversation about the future of work and future of business, right?
Yeah.
Telehealth. So the days of going to the doctor's office for an in-person visit for anything other than a major issue are kind of gone, right? I mean, and even up to including things like I think of crypto assets. So that's a bit of a stretch, but I mean, the way value is created and stored and distributed and things like Bitcoin and managed with tools like blockchain, again, all sort of technologies and attendant business models that didn't exist like 3 to 5, certainly to 10 years ago.
I'm a
So
big bel
opportunity.
Yes, I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule, and I think that there's going to be a lot of innovation, but most of it will fall off. What do you see in the future? Aside from what we're seeing right now, remote work and all this, utilization of technology. What are some of the up and coming platforms and opportunities do you think there will be?
Well, certainly there are going to be ways to rethink, um, healthcare writ large, and more specifically things like how healthcare is delivered. I mean, down to robots cleaning intensive care units, to using supercomputers for drug discovery, um, new ways to monitor and manage patient data on a global scale.
Hmm.
I think we have a long way to go with that, but wouldn't it be great if we could, leverage collective wisdom and knowledge to help address this pandemic, more systemically, more globally? I mean, I think that's a big challenge and a big opportunity as well.
Thank you for
Just,
sharing. Yeah,
a
this is
couple of
wonderful.
examples.
Yeah, I wonder though if you talked about earlier, Christopher, how people will be going through 8 to 10 jobs by a certain age. Um, how do they navigate that side of it if there is such an I'm in the door one day and I'm out the door the next? How do you build a relationship that's actually based on something that's material?
Well, I think again, relationships sort of take on a different meaning, right? So uh, there's a great book by Tom Malone. I think we should put this link
Yep,
in the
in the post.
content post
Yep.
event. Thomas Malone is a professor at MIT Sloan School of Management, right, connected to MIT up in Cambridge, Mass. He wrote a book called The Future of Work, and he wrote it like 10 years ago, but I think it's quite prescient. And his conjecture is that in the next decade or so, corporations will devolve and turn into basically a network of networks. So companies, big companies, certainly will have sort of a core set of constituents or subject matter experts. There'll be the strategy exec, and there'll be the operations exec, and maybe corporate legal, and a marketing person, an operations person.
Hmm.
And everything else will be managed across a network, the way that movies are made. So the message is, relationships are going to be key, and they're going to be very different from the kind of relationships you have now. So where you go into an office space and you interact with the same 20 or 30 people, or even globally, maybe if you work at IBM, you're interacting with some percentage of like 430,000 people all over the planet. But the idea of having your own sort of network and your own brand, your own voice, if you will,
Hmm.
is going to be critically important as you move through these multiple jobs and multiple careers. Because again, the premise is that the portfolio of products and services, this is my conjecture, right,
Yep.
of innovative companies is moving too fast to have people with niche skills or expertise. They're going to, the working person going through their working career life, are going to need to be ready to learn, unlearn, and relearn and do jobs that don't exist today. Take skills you have and identify what the delta is, what the gap is between what you need to know, and
Hmm.
then figure out where you need to learn it. And there are lots of options for where you can learn now. And learn those skills and then do the new job and then do it again and then do it again.
Yes, absolutely. This seems to me that the workplace will have less direct employees as well, and more independent contractors. The relationship has fundamentally changed, hasn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Now,
I
I
mean, it's,
wonder, given that we're all sort of tied to our home bases at the moment, and I have many friends and many colleagues who are definitely in this space where they're working from home. They're digitized. They've never been there, and a lot of them are very fearful of what's coming up. Again, I think this comes back to perspective. I wonder if we could talk a little bit about how to manage your fear of new technologies.
yeah, I mean, I think it's, we all have apprehensions to varying degrees, right?
Hmm.
Um, some people are totally comfortable embracing new tech, and some people are totally paranoid or anxious or apprehensive, trepidatious about what's coming. So I think as a general rule, it's a good idea to sort of take a step back and realize that technology has been changing again for like hundreds of years, and that we need to sort of understand what it is. That there's always going to be a period of sort of innovation and then some kind of rationalization or maybe even a crash where we figure out sort of what the standards might be, what the applicability might be, how it might drive business models, how it might provide value to society and culture, and then sort of a reckoning or an incorporation into everyone's daily life. And we go on and do it again, do it with the next thing. I mean, I think of personal computers, right? So can you imagine if we didn't have personal computers today? I think
Mm.
when they first arrived, they were expensive, certainly, sort of in the 80s and early 90s. They were complicated. Only a niche kind of small subset of the population could afford them and or was interested in using them. And now it's like on your wrist, right? I mean, this isn't a smartwatch, but I mean, it's amazing how the technology has been understood and adopted and incorporated and the value is perceived. So I would encourage people to keep that in mind if you're apprehensive about it.
It's almost as if you need to treat technology as a child would today, because they just embrace it, don't they?
Yeah, well, really, well, they're totally wired differently. I mean,
It's scary.
it is. We used to say at IBM, we used to have a contest for high school kids to build websites. This is in the early '90s, whatever. And we say, well, we're trying to find the kids who don't know it's supposed to be hard. We're like,
Ah,
okay, and that's who we found. You know, these
yeah.
young kids who just build a website. Okay, sure. We'll figure out what HTML is, and then we'll go.
And then they'll teach you.
Then I'll teach you exactly.
I wonder, I see some marvelous images of you giving talks and lectures and discussions in front of large groups. I'm interested to know, of the sum total of the conversations you've had over, say, the last 12 months, what is a common theme of the question base that you're receiving?
Well, I think a lot of people are wondering, like, what they're going to do. Like, what are the jobs? Like, how do I get a job? Which I think is very real, because people are being laid off, obviously. I mean, the number of unemployed in the U.S., for example, is, just a crazy big number. 40 million maybe, or something
It's
like that.
incredible.
So it's scary for sure, because I do a fair number of workshops at universities. I've been doing them virtually, needless to say, this spring and summer. It's a session I call How to Succeed at Jobs That Don't Exist Yet. And the idea, again, the theme is that there are going to be opportunities, and you just have to be comfortable that you have to chase them in a new way, certainly virtually. I mean, no one's doing in-person interviews, for example.
Hmm.
But I would encourage, young people, certainly college grads, early career millennials, I mean, anybody really, but certainly someone who's entering the job market and doesn't have any experience or any sense of how it works, to be prepared to embrace this new model and look for opportunities where, as I describe it, where they don't know what it is yet. So, like, what are people doing in drug discovery? Who's leading those efforts? I mean, they're using science in incredibly new ways to accelerate processes, right? Vaccine development that used to take 5 years, they're going to do it now in like 9 months. I mean, so who's doing that? And do you, the listener viewer, have skills, or even some skills that might be applied in that kind of setting? And as I said before, there are lots and lots of opportunities like that are emerging as a result of the pandemic and the global economic crisis.
This is wonderful content. So wonderful. It's a hand in glove experience. This call for us, Christopher. Thank you so very much. Now, I wonder, from a practical perspective, when people visit your content-rich website, they're going to see a lot of different things going on there. And I've spent a couple of hours actually going through all of the content. It's wonderful. I want to talk about your future career toolkit. Can you share with the audience what that's about?
Yes, for sure. And thank you for asking. Thank you for spending the time looking at all my content. I appreciate it. So the Future Career Toolkit is something that I've been developing over many years. And what it is I tried to take a step back and look at sort of consistent processes and or challenges and solutions that I developed over the years, going from touring rock musician to IBM exec, right? And I've codified them into what I call my Future Career Toolkit. And there are 3 tools: voice, antenna, and mesh. And the voice piece is around using triggers. It's actually a semantic intuition set of tools that I developed with this ideation guru, a friend who lives not far from me here in Connecticut.
Mm-hmm.
And using triggers like your favorite movie or a book or a TV show or even a game, and figuring out what about it resonates with you as a way to tease out areas you're focused on or that you're passionate about or interested in. And then we take the results of those triggers, that voice exercise, and plug them into a grid that I call antenna, which is a process of finding where are conversations going on around those topic areas. So to give you an example, so when I do it, I tease out Blade Runner 2049 is my favorite movie, recent movie, because it deals with sort of future tech and future culture, which I'm interested in. And then the book I liked was Rise and Fall of Nations by Ruchir Sharma. He's an economist. And he talks about sort of trending around GDP and education and what countries are emerging and evolving and which are sort of stagnating. And because I'm interested in global economics, because at the end of the day, it's all about business, whether we like it or not.
Of course.
So the antenna grid looks like me following BBC Click, for example, a TV show that's produced once a week about emerging technologies sort of at the fringe that are driving growing emerging business models. I look at the New York Times for sure. There's a show called Bloomberg Technology that's on every day at 5, and they talk about the connection between innovation and mostly Silicon Valley and technology and business.
Yeah.
So that's a source. And I, in the antenna piece, I ask people to call out some kind of longitudinal or temporal framework. So look at the New York Times every day, watch Bloomberg Technology at 5 o'clock, or New York Tech stuff maybe twice a day, and then BBC Click like once a week. So you set up sort of a framework, a pattern that you can use to kind of capture and be aware of conversations around your topic areas of interest, right?
Yep.
And then the third piece is mesh, which is tracking down, and I encourage people to use LinkedIn. I think it's the de facto standard, the lingua franca, the coin of the realm, right? I mean, there are 260 million people on LinkedIn, mostly professionals, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I encourage people to take the findings from the antenna exercise and figure out who are the actual people and or companies that are doing interesting, innovative work based on the topics that you teased out. And then connect with them and stay in touch with them, follow what they write about, follow them on Twitter, see who they follow, who they think is important or interesting. And again, back to the network building concept. And the more people that know who you are and what you're interested in, the better your odds of landing your next job and the one after that.
Thank you. I wonder if we can take a bit of a deep dive into your actual program and I guess the construct of it and what people are likely to find inside of it.
Yeah. Well, so this Future Career Toolkit is part of a course that I did for LinkedIn Learning. I spent a week in Santa Barbara on a soundstage at the end of January when you could go out for dinner and hang out in groups. And,
you were working.
really good. And I was working. I was reading from a teleprompter, blah, 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 this content that I had written. But I would encourage, again, viewers or listeners to check out the Future Career Toolkit, which is in this, sort of embedded in this course. To be honest, the toolkit is actually sort of vertical and discipline agnostic, but LinkedIn wanted me to cast it as a way to help future data scientists. So the name of the course is, putting my salesman hat on, Future-Proofing Your Data Science Career. And with all lack of modesty, I think there's some interesting content that sort of preamble that kind of sets it up. But again, I would encourage people who are not data scientists or not particularly focused in that field per se, to go take a look at this course and you could go right to the toolkit. And they've done a terrific job of laying out how it works. And we did it, me and the producer actually kind of walked through building out the grid and explaining the tools and how to use them and what the desired outcome or work product might be. And so, yeah, I think it's all there and pretty clear. So.
Is it a linear sort of experience, or is it one of these things that you can use as a resource and come back to certain chapters or parts? How do you use it?
Well, I think the toolkit again is something you can use like your whole life, your whole kind of set of careers, if you will, because they're designed again to be sort of vertical or discipline agnostic. It's a way to identify what you're passionate about or interested in or have skills in, and that's going to change, right? For sure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, as people go through these multiple careers, their skill sets are going to change. Just like, I was a touring rock musician who knew how to work in a studio with headphones and play in tune to a click track. And I went from there to, writing tweets for the CMO at IBM, like describing new product launches. So
who would have
again,
thought?
Different, who would have thought, right? Different sets of skills, but some transferable aspects like creativity and again, working to a timeline, working to a schedule and working at a certain level of sort of productivity or whatever. So the toolkit, your voice is going to change for sure. And the antenna therefore is going to change. The people and sources and channels that you're following are going to morph and evolve. And so is your mesh, your set of contacts, your sort of three-dimensional data visualized network of networks, if you will.
You have a wonderful mind, and you obviously just like a sponge. You take in knowledge. I wonder what other magnificent minds do you follow, either in books or audio books? Who do you follow at the moment?
Well, so one of the, I'm going to break away and show you this book.
Yeah, sure.
I just finished reading, which I encourage you to check out. Um, it's by
And by the
a
way, can I
writer.
just say I'm going to steal your chair. That looks very comfortable.
Oh yes, it is. It's good. It's very nice. It's a little big for the room, but my wife got it for me. It's comfortable. So here, this is a book by Philip Coggan, right?
Yep.
He's a writer for The Economist magazine, and it's a history of the world economy from the Iron Age to the Information Age. And it's a fascinating study in how sort of business and culture and society have evolved, and it's quite detailed, but his style is really great. So I would encourage people to check that if you're interested in, again, sort of the meta picture around sort of culture and business and technology, because he talks about, technology as a thread, obviously, through the discussion around global economic evolution, if you will.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So that's one guy. Tom Malone, again, the author of that book, The Future of Work.
Mm-hmm.
There's a futurist named Gerd Lienhardt in Zurich, and he does some wonderful webinars that I follow. Actually, a guy named Alan DeHaze, who's the CEO of Adecco, a staffing agency, is a very forward-thinking, insightful kind of workplace futurist. He's someone to explore. And I can send you links, or we can collaborate afterwards to make sure this information is available to your audience. Another guy named Ravin Jusuthan. He's a senior exec at Willis Towers Watson, and writes and speaks about future of work, and really, really brilliant guy. There's also an MIT organization called the Institute for Work of the Future, a woman named Elizabeth Reynolds. And I'll share this list with you so we can share it with your viewers or listeners. But
that's what we're all about.
Those are some of the kinds of people.
Yeah, we're all about adding value and sharing the wealth of knowledge that is available to us, which is, again, a product of technology, isn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Now,
I like to follow people that are academics, for sure, but the most interesting to me are the ones that sort of balance or split between academia and the real world. Because the private sector and public sector collaborations along with academia, that's sort of where innovation is taking place, and I think they're going to lead the next generation of innovative business models and technological breakthroughs.
Where the rubber meets the road, as it were. I'd like to ask you, if we could, about your talk, your TEDx talk on openness. Would you be able to share that experience? How was it for you?
It was great. I then was asked to join the board, which was exciting, and we produced a couple more events after that. But I was introduced to the woman who's the executive producer, this woman, Brandy Joy. And TED, as you might imagine, runs a very, as they say, a very tight ship.
Very structured.
Very structured. They protect their brand in no uncertain terms, right?
Fiercely.
So,
yep.
Yeah, fiercely, exactly. So in terms of coming up with a theme for the event and then keeping the content sort of on topic was challenging. To be honest, I think my talk is a little bit of a dog's breakfast, as we used to say. But I sat with the board and kind of went through what I wanted to talk about. Plus, you have like 9 minutes. So it's like writing a rock song with 3 chords, 1, 4, 5,
Yep.
Got to be focused. I practiced that thing word for word and took out words here and added words there and took out a slide here and expanded on this slide. Because you get out on the stage and there's a timer in front of you up on the balcony.
Oh, really?
Counting down. Yeah.
Oh, no pressure.
You're trying to be relaxed.
And you got to look like you're loving it.
Well, exactly. But it was great. So, they sat with me and said, okay, talk about this, talk about that, talk about this, don't talk about that. So the first part of it is kind of my multiple careers, or my career path. And then the second half was, they asked me to describe how IBM was using social media at the time to connect this global community of like 430,000 people. And they did some really interesting, smart things. Early adopters of Twitter and tweet chats and, again, virtual universe tools like Second Life and Unity 3D and OpenSim, ways to get to train managers in virtual environments with avatars representing the managers. I mean, it was cool.
You have had such a wonderful life experience thus far. I guess I'd like to know what your actual day looks like. I think that's very interesting in terms of touched on mindset earlier. Do you have days where you wake up and you go, you know what, I need a bit of a boost. How do I get myself into gear? How do you go about that?
Yeah, well, for sure. So the way it's been going here this summer is I sort of get up and I have coffee out on the deck. We have a deck kind of overlooking the woods, and
Very
I
nice.
typically will read. I'll look at the New York Times. I'll look at Bloomberg. Certainly check my email. There's a great app called Espresso that The Economist magazine puts
Yes.
out, and they update every morning. And they have sort of global, really succinct kind of snippets about what's happening, both politically as well as from a business perspective all over the world. Um, and then I'll think about, I mean, working on a book, so that's sort of something that I do when I have time,
Hmm.
fitting it in. But I look at what people are writing or posting on, say, on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And as I said today, I've been working on this piece for a while, sort of my chase the maelstrom view, and kind of writing it, refining it, editing it, tweaking it, finding the right images. And I just posted that this afternoon. So I try to post something like every, 10 days or 2 weeks. So I always have ideas, I sort of like a blog list of possible topics that I think are intriguing, that I want to write about.
Yep.
And then very often I'll do some reading. I'll sit down and like work on a book, or I have a new book from another writer at The Economist, sort of the history of economists. I think they've got like a dozen sort of seminal thinkers in the world of economics, and sort
Fantastic.
of their lives and how they evolved their theories and like that.
I often have book authors on the show. I have a special place on the show for book authors because I love to deep dive into the contents of a book. It'd be wonderful to invite you back. Now, I think about when people arrive at your website, they want to get their hands on your program. How are they going to go about finding you, and where are they going to go?
Yeah, well, certainly I accept pretty much any and all LinkedIn connection requests.
Hmm.
And the reason I do that is the flip of that is when I'm talking certainly to university students or early career millennials, my admonition to them is add 5 people a week to your LinkedIn profile. You're wagging my finger. Make it a job.
Yeah.
Like if Friday at 5 o'clock rolls around and you haven't added 5 people, get to it. Find people who are doing interesting work that are tied to something you want to be doing in the future, or that are providing, say, thought leadership or guidance around a project you're currently working on or an area you're exploring. Because again, it's a numbers game, right, at the end of the day. So that's certainly what I encourage people to do. Um, you know, I think of it as like direct mail
Hmm.
back in the old days. Some of your audience may not be young enough to remember that, but you send out 100 postcards, and if maybe 1 to 3 people responded, that was a pretty good rate of return.
Pretty happy
And
with
the
that.
same kind of thing is true of, say, sending resumes or reaching for people. And I find on LinkedIn, people are generally, willing to connect with you. So that said, reach for me. Anyone who's listening or watching, I'm happy to accept your connection request. I also do sort of one-on-one coaching. I've been doing some of that via Zoom. There's a woman data scientist in Toronto. We've been having weekly sessions. I'm sort of giving her guidance around both the data science field and career paths in general. I would encourage people to look at my course. Check out the Future Proofing Your Data Science Career. And again, if you're not a data scientist, you can go right to the Future Career Toolkit, as I mentioned, and explore that. I think you'd find that to be very beneficial.
Thank you so much for sharing. Now, for everybody who's on the call today, as is normally the case, I'll be making the links back to Christopher at improvisingcareers.com. There is a lot of great content on there. There's the LinkedIn website, all of the relevant information that you're ever going to need to learn more about your future and your involvement with work in the future. Now, Christopher, with all that being said, I have had just such a wonderful time spending some time with you on the My Future Business show today.
Well, thank you. So I have my closing comment, which I like to share with your audience, is, again, when I'm speaking to people, say, apprehensive about future business models or new careers or job paths or whatever, is I say, You guys and gals are going to create stuff that's going to look like magic to me. So get to it. I want to see it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right?
Now,
We're at a seminal moment.
you and I are going to be spending some time after the call arranging all of these wonderful links and resources for our audience. So again, thank you very much for spending some time with me on the show today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. It was my pleasure. Delighted to be here.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.